The African Union. It was supposed to be the continent's ultimate shield, built on a powerful idea: African solutions for African problems. Forged in the fire of past failures, it was a promise that from now on, Africa would guard its own peace. It has a charter, a council, and the authority to step in when faced with genocide and war crimes. It even has an army, on paper anyway, ready to go. And yet, as you're watching this, a shadow war is raging in Sudan, creating what many call the world's worst humanitarian crisis. The Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo is caught in a brutal, endless cycle of violence that has displaced millions. And across the Sahel, a chain of military coups has wiped out years of democratic progress. The African Union's Peace and Security Council holds urgent meetings, fires off strongly worded statements, and calls for everyone to just talk. But on the ground, the guns are only getting louder. Guns are... So what is going on here? The AU has one of the most sophisticated peace and security rulebooks in the world, but it often seems powerless to stop the violence in its own backyard. The shield, it seems, is broken. The solutions are falling short. We have to ask, why? What makes Africa's designated peacemaker so powerless? Section 1. The Grand Dream and the Empty Purse. To get why it's failing, you have to understand the dream. The African Union, or AU, wasn't just a simple rebranding of its predecessor, the Organization of African Unity. It was a complete philosophical reset. The OAU was handcuffed by a rigid policy of non-interference, which often meant it was a silent witness to absolute atrocities. The AU was built to be different. It created something called the African Peace and Security Architecture, or APSA, and at its core, the Peace and Security Council, a body a bit like the UN Security Council with the power to send in troops and slap on sanctions. This was the blueprint for African solutions for African problems, a declaration of independence from centuries of outside intervention. It's a noble vision, but a vision without money is just a hallucination. And this is the AU's first and maybe biggest problem. It is chronically, devastatingly broke. Peacekeeping costs a fortune. You have to move thousands of troops, feed them, house them, and equip them with everything from armored vehicles to medical supplies. The AU doesn't have a mandatory payment system from its members like the UN does. Its peace fund, while a great idea, would be wiped out by a single major mission. So the AU is almost completely dependent on the kindness of strangers. Its biggest peace operations aren't funded by Africa, but by external partners like the European Union, the UN, and other donor nations. This creates a massive contradiction. How can you have African solutions when the funding comes with foreign strings attached? He who pays the piper calls the tune. This reliance on outside cash cripples the AU's independence. Missions often get designed not around what's actually needed, but what donors are willing to pay for. It's hard to have operational sovereignty when your every move depends on a funding decision made in Brussels or New York. This makes long-term peace-building almost impossible. For decades, the Holy Grail has been predictable, sustainable funding. A glimmer of hope appeared in late 2023 with UN Security Council Resolution 2719. It created a way for the UN to use its own money to pay for up to 75% of AU-led peace missions. On paper, it looked like the breakthrough everyone was waiting for. But it's a double-edged sword. First, the AU still has to cough up the other 25%, which is a huge challenge. Second, and this is the big one, the deal comes with more UN oversight. Many in the AU worry this could mean a loss of African control, where the UN Security Council, not the AU, calls the shots. The dream of African-led solutions is at risk of being hijacked. And the first test case for this new model has been a worrying failure. The new AU mission in Somalia, Awesome, which launched in January 2025, was the perfect candidate for Resolution 2719. But in May 2025, the UN Security Council failed to agree on using the new funding plan, reportedly because the United States opposed it. Now, the mission is stuck with the same old money problems as its predecessors. The message this sends is chilling. Even with a new mechanism, the power to turn the money tap on or off is still held firmly outside of Africa. The empty purse remains the AU's Achilles heel. Section 2. The politics of paralysis. Even if the AU had unlimited cash, a second, sneakier problem would still exist: political paralysis. The AU is a club of 55 sovereign states, each with its own agenda, its own friends, and its own definition of what's important. Too often, the continent's collective security comes second to the political games of its most powerful members. The old ghost of the OAU, non-interference, still haunts the halls of the AU headquarters in Addis Ababa. While the AU's rulebook gives it the right to intervene in a member state in cases of war crimes or genocide, its aligned leaders are terrified to cross. Voting for an action that could one day be used against your own government is the ultimate political risk. The result is a shocking lack of political will. You can see this clearly in how the AU has handled the recent wave of military coups. When a coup happens, the playbook is clear: suspend the country, condemn the junta, and demand a quick return to democracy. Sometimes that happens, but other times the response is weak or late. The AU's reaction often depends less on the principle and more on the political weight of the country involved, or the interests of its powerful neighbors. This inconsistency destroys the AU's credibility as a neutral defender of democratic rules. On top of that, the Peace and Security Council itself, with its 15 members, can be a place where powerful countries and their regional allies protect friends and block action. Building a consensus is tough, and acting on it is even tougher. Just look at Sudan. Since war broke out in April 2023, the AU has been mostly on the sidelines. It suspended Sudan after a 2021 coup, and its high-level panel has called for dialogue. But it has very little real influence over the warring generals. The AU recently condemned the formation of a parallel government by the paramilitary RSF, but it's powerless to stop it. The warring parties are still determined to win on the battlefield, ignoring the AU's calls for peace. This political paralysis also affects the type of interventions. There's a strong preference for sending in troops over doing the much harder long-term work of fixing the root causes of conflict. Things like bad governance, corruption, land disputes, and unequal access to resources are the dry tinder that fuels civil wars. The AU's framework knows this, but deploying soldiers is a visible, decisive-looking action. Tackling systemic political failures is messy, politically risky, and challenges the power of the member states themselves. It's much easier to send a peacekeeper than to demand real reform from a fellow head of state. This focus on the symptoms, not the disease, means that even when the AU does intervene, the peace it creates is often shaky, because the real problems are left to fester. Section 3. The coordination conundrum. Okay, let's pretend for a second that the money is there and the political will is solid. The AU decides to launch a major peace operation. Now it hits its third wall, the coordination conundrum. Putting together a multinational army is a logistical nightmare. You have soldiers from different countries who speak different languages, use different gear, and have different training. Getting them to work together as one cohesive unit is a massive undertaking. The AU's own institutions are often not set up to handle this kind of complexity. They just don't have enough technical experts to manage the logistics, command, and control of thousands of people in a war zone. The G5 Sahel Joint Force is a textbook example of these problems. Created in 2017 by 5 Sahelian countries to fight terrorism, it was praised as a new model of African-led security. But from day one, it was hobbled by a lack of resources, poor coordination, and a heavy reliance on outside support, especially from France. With several countries withdrawing and regional politics shifting, the force has become largely defunct, a shadow of what it was meant to be. The AU's own history is full of examples of ambition getting ahead of capacity. The very first AU-led mission in Darfur, Sudan, in the early 2000s, is a tragic case in point. The mission, IMIS, was deployed with a weak mandate and completely inadequate funding and logistics. The troops were brave, but they were simply overwhelmed. Eventually, the mission had to be folded into a larger hybrid AU-UN operation, admitting that the AU couldn't handle the crisis alone. It was a painful early lesson in the gap between the vision of African solutions and the reality of the AU's limits. This coordination problem isn't just military, it's also diplomatic. In many crises, you have a confusing alphabet soup of mediators. The AU, regional bodies like ECOWAS or SADC, the UN, and various international groups, all trying to broker peace. Their efforts are often fragmented and sometimes even work against each other. In the DRC, the AU, the East African Community, EAC, and the Southern African Development Community, SADC, are all trying to solve the conflict. While they are now trying to merge their efforts into a single African-led process, achieving a unified strategy that can force everyone to the table remains a huge challenge. This fragmentation lets warring groups pick and choose their mediators, playing them off each other to stall progress and keep the conflict going. Section 4. The human cost of inaction. These three obstacles, the empty purse, the political paralysis, and the coordination conundrum, are not just abstract failures. They have a devastating real-world cost, measured in human lives, and nowhere is this clearer than in Somalia. For nearly 2 decades, the AU has been on the front lines in Somalia, in what has become its longest and deadliest mission. The mission, which has gone through several name changes and is now AUSM, is a case study in both the potential and the ultimate powerlessness of the African Union. On one hand, the AU can claim some success. Its troops, at great human cost, pushed the extremist group Al-Shabaab out of Mogadishu and other major cities. They created enough space for a fragile Somali government to form and for aid to be delivered. Without the AU, the Somali state might have completely collapsed. But that success is dangerously fragile. Al-Shabaab is still a deadly threat, controlling large parts of the countryside and launching devastating attacks. The core problem is that military action was never matched by a real political solution. Somalia is still deeply divided, with power struggles between the central government and federal states. The Somali security forces have been slow to develop the capacity to take over, forcing the AU mission's drawdown to be postponed again and again. And now, the new AUSM mission, which started in 2025, seems doomed to repeat the same cycle. It is already facing a severe financial crisis, with the promised UN funding framework on hold and a massive debt inherited from its predecessor. The mission is being undermined by political disputes and geopolitical rivalries. After all this time, billions of dollars and thousands of lives lost, there is still no clear end in sight. The AU is trapped. It can't leave without risking a total collapse, but it can't win under the current conditions. It's a similar story across the continent. In the eastern DRC, the AU's Peace and Security Council holds emergency meetings and expresses its grave concern as the M23 rebel group continues its advance. But its calls for a ceasefire are ignored. International aid groups are left pleading for the AU to take real action to protect civilians trapped in the violence. The AU's statements reaffirm respect for the DRC's sovereignty, but on the ground, that sovereignty is violated daily. The gap between the words in a press release and the reality for a person fleeing their home has never been wider. TS in conclusion. So, back to our question, why is Africa's peacemaker so powerless? It's not for a lack of bravery from its soldiers. It's not for a lack of a grand vision. The AU is hobbled by a trio of deep flaws built into its DNA. It's an organization with the mandate of a superpower but the budget of a small government department, leaving it at the mercy of foreign donors' strategic interests. It's a union of sovereign states where the collective good is often sacrificed for national politics. And it's a bureaucracy that struggles to coordinate the immense military and diplomatic machine needed to bring peace to a continent of 1.4 billion people. The dream of African solutions for African problems remains one of the most powerful and important ideas of our time. But as long as the solutions are underfunded, the politics are paralyzed, and the coordination is chaotic, it will remain just that, a dream. The challenge for the continent's leaders, and for all who want to see a peaceful and prosperous Africa, is to face these failures honestly. What will it take to finally build a peacemaker with the power to match its purpose? And if the African Union can't do it, who will? What do you believe is the single biggest obstacle holding the African Union back? The funding, the politics, or something else entirely? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you value deep dives into the complex issues shaping our world, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next investigation.